It had been 2 years since my marriage, yet the absence of children had turned my life into a storm of unspoken grief. Outwardly, my world seemed perfect. My home was filled with every luxury, and my husband, Ashfaq, had more wealth than most could imagine. But behind closed doors, my heart ached with an emptiness that wealth could never fill. In the early days of our marriage, there was warmth between us. His affection made me believe that no matter what challenges came our way, we would face them together. But as months turned into years and no child blessed our lives, a distance began to grow. Ashfaq became quiet and withdrawn, as though an invisible wall had risen between us. His eyes carried disappointment, and his words, though few, often cut deeply. I suggested adoption many times, trying to explain that perhaps love for a child did not always need to come from blood. Yet he never agreed. For him, lineage was everything. "My heir must be my own flesh and blood," he said with certainty each time the subject arose. To him, adopting a child was not the solution, for his family name and wealth demanded a successor directly from him. Though his words carried logic in his world, my heart still longed desperately for motherhood. I had tried everything I knew, visiting shrines, praying at night with tears streaming down my face, giving charity, and seeking the blessings of elders. I begged God with all my soul to grant me a child. But each passing month left me more broken, as hope dimmed and despair grew heavier. Whenever I asked Ashfaq to visit a doctor with me, his answer was always the same. "There is nothing wrong with me. The fault lies with you," he declared. He called me barren, and though I stayed silent, his words pierced me like sharp thorns. On more than one occasion, he threatened to marry again. Each time he spoke those words, my heart trembled, yet I swallowed my pain, afraid to make matters worse. Despite living in comfort, my soul felt restless. Nights became long and sleepless. I often found myself pacing the house like a lost traveler with no destination. At my weakest, I even considered ending my life, but the fear of displeasing God held me back. I knew that such a step was forbidden, and so I endured in silence. What the world saw was a woman surrounded by wealth, but what I felt inside was emptiness so vast that no riches could fill it. All I desired was the blessing of a child, and without it, even the grandest life felt incomplete. One afternoon, I went to visit my mother. She had gathered my sisters and other family members in the house, and for a brief while, I felt comforted by their presence. Everyone seemed cheerful, and many spoke kindly of the life I lived, how I had no shortage of wealth, how my days appeared filled with comfort. Their words should have been reassuring, yet to me they felt hollow. I carried a hidden wound, one no luxury could heal. As we sat together, my younger sister suddenly spoke in a tone that pierced me deeply. "All this wealth, all this comfort," she said with a half smile. "But what is the use of it when you have no child? Without a child, all of it is meaningless." Her words struck me like an arrow, and before I could recover, her young daughter came and sat in my lap. For a fleeting moment, I held the child close, as though my own prayers had been answered in that instant. But my sister quickly pulled her away from me, her expression sharp. "Please," she added coldly, "Tae Hun, stay away from my children. Who knows what misfortune surrounds you?" Her words left me frozen in disbelief. My own sister, my blood, had spoken so harshly, and I sat there stunned, my heart breaking quietly within me. My mother immediately scolded her, anger flashing in her eyes. "Mind your tongue," she said firmly. "Have you forgotten your manners? Is this how you speak to your elder sister?" But the damage was already done. Tears welled in my eyes, and before anyone could stop me, I rose from my seat, picked up my handbag, and walked out of the house. Behind me, I could hear voices calling, urging me to stop. My sisters and sister-in-law rushing toward the door, but I could not bring myself to turn back. My heart was too heavy, my dignity too wounded. Outside, our driver was waiting. Without a word, I stepped into the car, and we drove away. When I reached home, I went straight to my room and locked the door. For hours, I sat there in silence, tears streaming down my face. I felt as though my heart would burst from sorrow. That day, I had never felt so alone. The world seemed cruel, but the cruelty of family was sharper than anything else. As night fell, I prayed with all the strength left in me. "Oh God," I whispered through sobs, "bless me with a child or take me from this world. I can no longer bear this pain." That evening, the door to my room opened quietly, and Ashfaq stepped in. He had returned from work earlier than usual, and for the first time in a long while, his expression showed genuine concern. He found me sitting on the floor, my face streaked with tears, my body trembling from hours of silent weeping. I must have looked broken, because without hesitation, he set aside his laptop and rushed toward me. "Rahila," he said softly, kneeling beside me. His voice was low, uncertain, but filled with a care I had not felt for months. As he pulled me into his arms, I finally let go. My sobs broke into the silence, and I cried against his chest as though I had been holding back for years. He held me tightly, stroking my hair, whispering words of comfort, though my pain was too great to be silenced. Between sobs, I lifted my head and looked at him with desperate eyes. "Ashfaq," I pleaded, "I cannot go on like this. We must see a doctor, both of us. We must know what is wrong. If there is a problem, we will face it together. But I need answers. I cannot keep living in this uncertainty." He looked startled at the force of my words. For a moment, I thought he would dismiss me, as he had always done before. But something in my tone, or perhaps the sight of my despair, shook him. He wiped the tears from my cheeks and tried to calm me, yet I could see he understood that this time I would not be silenced. When he realized I would not back down, Ashfaq finally nodded. "All right," he said quietly. "We will go. Tomorrow, we will visit a doctor." His voice carried a hint of resignation, but also an unfamiliar tenderness, as though he feared losing me if he refused. I felt a surge of determination rise within me. For once, I would not be treated as the only one at fault. This was a matter for both of us, and the truth had to be faced. I wrapped a black shawl around myself the next morning, and together we drove to the hospital. There, we met Dr. Ruxana, a professional woman whose calm demeanor gave me hope. She asked us many questions, noting down details carefully. I wanted to blurt out, "Please, just give me a child." But instead I stayed silent, allowing her to guide the process. After several tests, she told us we would have to wait for the reports. As we left her office, silence hung between us. Both of us carried unspoken fears, waiting for answers that could change our lives forever. That night, my sorrow weighed on me so heavily that it felt impossible to breathe. Hours passed as I sat on the floor of my room, unable to stop the tears that flowed endlessly. My eyes were swollen, my hands trembling, and my heart restless. I felt as though the silence of the house pressed down on me, reminding me of the emptiness I carried. It was then that the door opened softly and Ashfaq entered. For a moment, he simply stood there, his usual composure shaken as he saw the state I was in. Without a word, he put his laptop aside and hurried toward me. His arms reached out, and gently, he lifted me from the floor. I collapsed against his chest, my sobs breaking out with a force I could no longer hold back. He tried to soothe me, whispering words of comfort, but my grief was too raw. "Ashfaq," I cried, my voice broken. "I cannot endure this any longer. I need us to face the truth together. We must both go to the doctor. Not just me, both of us. We must know where the problem lies. We must find a way." For a moment, he was silent, his eyes flickering with unease. In the past, whenever I had suggested such a step, he dismissed it quickly, declaring there was nothing wrong with him. But tonight, he saw my desperation, and it silenced his pride. He held me tighter, as though afraid of losing me, then finally nodded. "All right," he said quietly, his voice lower than usual. "Tomorrow we will go. We will see what the doctors say." His agreement was like a small light in the darkness. Though my heart still carried fear, I felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps, at last, the truth would be known. The next day, I covered myself in a black shawl, and together we left for the hospital. The drive was quiet, neither of us speaking, both lost in our thoughts. When we arrived, we were welcomed into the office of Dr. Ruxana, a calm and professional woman whose presence gave me a sense of reassurance. She listened patiently as we explained our situation and then ordered tests for both of us. As we waited, I felt an ache in my chest. I wanted to cry out to her, "Please, give me a child." But instead I stayed silent, gripping my hands tightly together. When the tests were completed, she told us gently to wait for the reports. We left her office in silence, carrying with us the weight of questions that had no answers yet. When we returned from the hospital, the house felt strangely quiet. I sat in the living room, lost in thought, while Ashfaq paced back and forth with his hands clasped behind his back. The weight of waiting for the medical reports seemed heavier than anything we had ever carried before. For 2 years, we had both lived under a shadow of uncertainty, and now the moment of truth was close. Breaking the silence, Ashfaq came and sat beside me. His tone was softer than usual. Rahila, he said, looking directly into my eyes, I know you are in pain. I know what you endure every time someone taunts you. I may not have understood before, but I can see it now. Please believe me, I never wanted to make you feel less than what you are. His words surprised me. For so long, he had reacted with anger or silence whenever I spoke of my grief. But now, for the first time, I felt as if he truly saw me, not just as his wife, but as a woman burdened with sorrow. I blinked through my tears, unable to respond at once. He took my hands gently and continued, We must accept whatever comes. If the problem lies with you, I promise I will not abandon you. And if it lies with me, I pray you will not turn against me. Whatever happens, we must face it together. I stared at him in disbelief. This was not the man who had once threatened to remarry if I could not give him a child. This was someone different, softer, more vulnerable. Part of me felt comforted, but another part was unsettled. Why this sudden change of heart? Why this sudden tenderness? My instincts whispered that something deeper lay behind his words. That night, as I lay awake beside him, thoughts swirled endlessly in my mind. I remembered the countless nights I had cried alone, the harsh words he had spoken, the loneliness I had endured. If he truly cared, why had he not spoken this way earlier? And yet, despite my doubts, a faint hope flickered inside me that maybe this was the beginning of a new chapter. The following morning, the hospital called to inform us that our reports were ready. My heart pounded as we prepared to leave. I wrapped myself once more in my black shawl, and together we drove in silence. Each of us praying silently for good news, yet fearing what awaited us. When we sat again in Dr. Ruxana's office, the air was heavy with tension. The reports lay on her desk, sealed in envelopes. I folded my hands tightly in my lap, whispering a silent prayer. Whatever truth was about to be revealed, I knew it would change our lives forever. Inside the doctor's office, the air felt so heavy that even breathing seemed difficult. Ashfaq and I sat side by side, our eyes fixed on the desk where the sealed reports lay. My heart pounded so loudly in my chest that I feared the doctor might hear it. Dr. Ruxana adjusted her glasses, glanced at us, and then carefully opened the first envelope, mine. She read quietly for a moment before lifting her eyes. Her expression was calm, almost reassuring. Rahila, she said gently, your reports are completely clear. There is nothing wrong with you medically. You are perfectly healthy. For a second, I could not believe what I was hearing. A wave of relief surged through me, and tears welled up in my eyes. I had carried the weight of blame for so long, enduring accusations, taunts, and whispered words of failure. To finally hear that I was not at fault filled me with gratitude I could not express. I bowed my head, whispering a silent prayer of thanks to God. But my joy lasted only a moment. The second envelope was still unopened. I turned to look at Ashfaq. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed firmly on the table as though he already knew what was coming. The doctor opened his report and studied it carefully. Her face grew serious, and she hesitated before speaking. Ashfaq's impatience broke the silence. Say it, he demanded. Why are you quiet? Tell me what it says. Dr. Ruxana looked at him steadily and spoke with measured words. Mr. Ashfaq, in cases like these, people often assume the fault lies with the woman. But the truth can sometimes be different. Your tests show that you are unable to father a child. The words hung in the room like thunder. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. I sat frozen, staring at him while he leaned back in his chair as though the ground had slipped from beneath him. Then suddenly, anger erupted. He slammed his hand on the desk, his voice rising. This is nonsense. You people don't know what you're saying. How dare you make such claims about me? His face flushed with rage, and he kicked the chair violently aside. Dr. Ruxana remained calm, though her voice was firm. These reports are accurate. Denying them will not change the truth. It is better to accept the results and discuss possible treatment. But Ashfaq could not hear reason. His pride had been wounded in the deepest way. He stormed out of the office, shouting threats about shutting down the hospital. I followed him, shaken and silent, my relief now buried under a fresh wave of fear. We returned home in complete silence. The drive from the hospital felt longer than ever. Ashfaq gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His eyes were fixed on the road, but his expression was filled with turmoil. I sat quietly beside him, afraid that even a single word might fuel his anger further. The truth had been spoken, yet he refused to accept it. His pride had been struck in the most painful way. When we finally reached home, he stormed into the bedroom, pacing back and forth like a restless soul. At one moment, he pressed his palms against his forehead. At another, he clenched his fist, his breathing uneven. I stood at the door, watching him struggle with emotions he could not name. I knew this was the moment he needed me most, yet his rage built a wall between us. Gathering courage, I stepped closer and sat beside him on the edge of the bed. Gently, I placed my hand on his shoulder. Ashfaq, I said softly, Besha, please listen to me. I know these words are hard to accept, but this is not the end. Medicine has advanced so much. With treatment, there may be a way. And even if there isn't, you still have me by your side. We are in this together. His eyes filled with unshed tears, though he tried to hide them. He turned his face away, unwilling to let me see his weakness. I could feel the storm within him, the fear, the shame, the wounded pride. I leaned closer, my voice calm but firm. This truth will remain between us. I will never let the world know. No one will ever hear this from me. You are my husband, my partner. I will never betray you. For a moment, I thought my words might reach him. His shoulders trembled and his breathing softened, but then, just as quickly, his anger flared again. He pushed my hand away and glared at me. You planned this, didn't you? He accused bitterly. You wanted me to look weak. You wanted me to fall in your eyes. You tricked me into these tests so you could prove yourself right. His words pierced me, yet I stayed silent. I could see this was not truly him speaking, but his wounded pride. Still, the pain was sharp. I lowered my head, holding back tears, realizing that my compassion was being mistaken for betrayal. That night, he left the house abruptly, slamming the door behind him. I remained behind, sitting in the quiet room with my head in my hands. My heart ached, not just for myself, but for him. I wanted to be his strength, but his pride had turned me into his enemy. The house was wrapped in silence when Ashfaq finally returned late at night. I had been sitting on the bed for hours, my mind restless, my body heavy with exhaustion. I knew he would come back eventually, but I did not know in what state he would return, angry, cold, or broken. The sound of the front door unlocking sent a shiver through me. I stayed still, waiting. He entered the room quietly, his shoulders slumped, his steps slower than usual. The fire of anger that had burned in him earlier seemed dimmed now, replaced by a heavy weariness. Without speaking, he lay down beside me. I turned to look at him. His face was pale, his eyes distant, and though he tried to turn away, I moved closer and held him gently. At first, he resisted, shifting away as though ashamed to let me near, but I tightened my arms around him and whispered softly, Ashfaq, you are my husband. Nothing can change that. Whatever the doctor said today, it does not change who you are to me. You are still the man I married, the man I chose. Don't push me away. Slowly, his body relaxed. He let out a long breath, and for the first time, I felt him lean into me rather than pull away. In the quiet of the night, he allowed himself to be vulnerable, something I had rarely seen before. He did not speak, but I could feel the storm of his emotions in the way his hands trembled and his heart raced beneath my touch. I whispered words of reassurance, reminding him that no matter what, we still had each other. I reminded him that life was more than just bloodlines and heirs, that love and companionship were treasures greater than wealth. For the first time in many days, he responded, not with anger, but with silence that felt almost like surrender. That night, we found a fragile peace. By morning, his mood was lighter, and he looked at me with gratitude. At breakfast, he even thanked me softly for standing beside him and not turning against him. It was a rare moment of closeness, and though I cherished it, a part of me remained unsettled. His sudden tenderness felt too fragile, as though it might vanish with the slightest shift. I prayed silently that this change would last, that perhaps the hardship we had faced might draw us closer. Yet deep within, I carried a fear I could not name, a fear that the road ahead still held storms neither of us was ready to face. The days that followed were quieter. Ashfaq's anger had softened, and though he was still troubled, he no longer spoke to me with the same harshness as before. For a short while, I allowed myself to believe that perhaps things would slowly heal between us. I tried to keep the house peaceful, made sure meals were ready on time, and gave him no reason to feel more burdened. Yet behind his calm exterior, I sensed a heaviness in him, a restlessness that refused to leave. One morning, as we sat together at the dining table, Ashfaq suddenly set his cup of tea down and looked at me intently. Rahila, he said in a low voice, I need to tell you something important. His tone carried a weight that immediately unsettled me. I put my spoon down and gave him my full attention. What is it? I asked gently. He leaned forward, his eyes fixed on mine. You know how much I long for an heir. Wealth means nothing if it cannot be passed down to a child of my own blood. I cannot imagine my family name ending with me. He paused, then added, I don't care if the blood is mine or yours. But it must not be a stranger's. Adoption is not an option. His words confused me. I don't understand, I replied softly. What are you trying to say? Ashfaq lowered his gaze for a moment, then looked back up with a seriousness that made my heart pound. There is one way, he said. If I cannot give you a child, then perhaps another man can. The room fell silent. His words echoed in my ears, leaving me stunned. For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood. My face flushed with shock. Ashfaq, do you realize what you're saying? I whispered, unable to hide the tremor in my voice. He reached for my hand, trying to calm me. Listen to me, he said quickly. I know how it sounds, but think about it. If we adopt, the entire family will scorn us. They will call the child an outsider. But if you conceive within our home, then the child will be accepted as ours. No one would ever know the truth. We can keep this secret, and my family name will continue. I pulled my hand back, shaking my head in disbelief. The man who had once scolded me for being childless was now suggesting something I could barely even think of. My heart ached with confusion. How could he ask this of me? That morning, the peace I had hoped for shattered. His words lingered like a shadow, one that would change everything between us. After Ashfaq's words, my mind was thrown into turmoil. I could not believe what I had just heard. The man who once accused me of barrenness now suggested something so unthinkable that another man could be brought into our lives to give us a child. At first, I felt only anger and humiliation. How could my husband, whom I trusted, even allow such thoughts to form? But as the hours passed, my anger gave way to a different kind of restlessness. His reasoning echoed in my mind. If we adopted, the entire family would gossip. Relatives would whisper that the child was not truly ours. Ashfaq feared disgrace, and though I hated to admit it, his fears were not unfounded. In our society, appearances mattered more than truth. I wandered through the house in silence, my mind racing, and then my eyes fell on Kamran, our longtime servant. He was nearly 50, yet he had aged gracefully, his face and body carrying the strength of someone younger. He worked quietly in the kitchen, unaware of my troubled gaze. An uneasy thought crept into my heart, one I tried to push away. But it returned again and again. If what Ashfaq suggested had to happen, would it not be safer to involve someone already within the walls of our home? A stranger could expose us, but Kamran was bound by loyalty and by need. The idea frightened me, but desperation clouded my judgment. The desire for a child was burning me alive. Slowly, I convinced myself that perhaps Ashfaq's suggestion was not madness, but a bitter solution to our hopelessness. That evening, I resolved to speak with him again. This time not in anger, but with questions. My heart trembled, knowing the path ahead would forever change us both. The decision that followed was one I never imagined making. In my desperation for motherhood, I allowed my husband's fear of disgrace to cloud my own judgment. After much hesitation, Kamran, our servant, was approached. At first, he was shocked and refused outright. But when tempted with wealth and reminded of his loyalty, his resistance weakened. What should have been rejected without a thought was tragically accepted. Days later, my life changed in ways I could never have foreseen. I began to feel unwell, first with small signs of weakness, then with severe illness that drained all my strength. My body, once strong enough to bear the weight of sorrow, now faltered under a different burden. Ashfaq grew concerned, and together we sought answers from doctors once again. The truth struck us like a thunderbolt. Kamran had been carrying a grave illness, and through our reckless decision, I too had been infected. In the weeks that followed, Ashfaq tested positive as well. The house that once echoed with dreams of children now became a place of silence and despair. No amount of wealth could save us. We tried treatments, sought specialists, and spent sleepless nights in prayer, but the damage was done. Our longing for a child had led us to a path of destruction. As I sat in my room, weak and frail, I wept bitterly. I begged God for forgiveness, realizing too late the depth of our mistake. We had sought to control what was never in our hands, forgetting that life and children are blessings only He can grant. Now we were left as a reminder to others, a lesson written in our pain. Our story became not one of wealth or lineage, but of regret, teaching that no desire is worth losing one's faith, dignity, and peace.